Welcome everyone to our Teachable Tuesday, another webinar series. Looks like people are still logging on, but we will start rolling. I just wanted to remind everyone that we have pushed our previously scheduled webinar from today to next Tuesday. Jess will cover those details at the end of this webinar. We have a packed house. I see we have a few veterans who attended our previous webinars and quite a few new attendees. All right, so let's get started on today's webinar, Communicating to Staff and Customers During a COVID Crisis. Adam Dooley, President of Dooley PR and Marketing, will join WRLA's Marketing and Communications Manager, Leah Curry, to walk through how businesses should be communicating with staff and customers during the COVID crisis. This series will feature an overview of best practices when it comes to crisis communications. It will also give you an opportunity to ask questions to our experts. It's hard to know what to do or say in a crisis. This session will help guide you with our next steps. So the WRLA staff, Jessica Kremner, she is our trade show and events manager. She will be speaking later, and myself am the member services and solutions manager. Just want to go over some quick housekeeping items. All attendees will be muted. You should be able to hear myself, and then I will mute myself and then pass it on to Adam, etc. If you have any questions, please use the chat function at the bottom of the screen and type in your questions during the webinar. Jess had already said, welcome everyone. So in that little panel, feel free to ask any questions, and then between Adam and Leah, we'll handle those questions. And then Jess and I will monitor the questions. And then finally, a copy of the slides will be sent out post-webinar and will also post to our website. Okay, so one of our main presenters, Adam Dooley. Over the past 2.5 decades, Adam has developed and executed communication programs for regional, national, and North American organizations. As an expert at integrating public relations with advertising and marketing tactics, Adam strategizes, build strong brands, and polished corporate images. He's launched Dooley PR and Marketing as Dooley Communications in 2007 after an award-winning career as a reporter, editor, and corporate communications executive. He was formerly VP of Marketing and Communications at Cambrian Credit Union, one of the largest financial institutions in the Canadian provinces. Prior to that, he helped manage communications for Asante corporations across Canada and the US. Adam holds an honors MBA in history from the University of Saskatchewan and a master's degree in journalism from the University of Western Ontario. We've included Adam's contact information. There's his LinkedIn profile, his Facebook, his Twitter, his email, and his website for further contact with Adam. On to our one and only Leah Curry. Leah is the Marketing and Communications Manager here at the WRLA. She has been in the communications and marketing industry for 15 years, specializing in strategic communications, public and media relations, advertising, and print publications. As an avid philanthropist, okay, next time let's not use big words. Leah has volunteered with numerous nonprofits that better help her in the community, such as Winnipeg Humane Society, Ronald McDonald House, and Marymount. And we've also included her contact information, and for more information, always feel free to visit our website. Okay, so without further ado, we will pass it on to Adam.
Okay, great. I'm just sharing my screen here. Is that all good there, Aaron? I think we're live. Thanks very much, everyone. I wish we were meeting under different circumstances with what's going on, but wanted to say thank you very much to Aaron and Jess and Leah for inviting me to give you sort of a crash course in crisis communications, something that I've been doing for a long time. And I'm happy to help. Here's what we're going to be covering today. Yeah. There we go. So we're going to go over high-level goals and principles for crisis communications, something that, things that you should be keeping front of mind as you're talking to staff, as well as customers, and really anybody in your life. I think during this time, if you're a leader in your organization, a leader in your family, I think some of these things will be translatable to that as well. I think I want to just emphasize that good leaders are good communicators. There's a lot of evidence that's over the last few decades that the companies that go through crises, that communicate the best through those crises, rebound from the crisis faster. And it's not hard to understand why. Good communications means that you're engaging with your stakeholder audiences, with your groups, target audiences, and they're understanding what you're going through and what the next steps are. And a good communication strategy will also develop a lot more credibility and trust. So today we'll also go over some external communications tips, as well as what to do when you're talking with staff. And then, because we want to really be of value, as much value as we can for you today, we've left a big chunk of time at the end for your questions to deal with anything that you're going through right now. Aaron, can you put up the first poll question? With Zoom, we can poll our webinar participants. So we've got 3 little polls today. This is the first one. And while you're answering that, I'll move on. Okay, so just a little bit about us. Aaron's already introduced me, so I'll just say a little bit about our background. We started in 2007 with really a PR focus, and we handled a lot of crises over that time, the succeeding 13 years, including working with Western Financial Group when their headquarters in High River, Alberta were flooded out. We've dealt with customers who had runaway rail cars, who had to deal with bomb threats of personal injury. We've prepared them for coroner's inquests. We've counseled literally hundreds of executives and boards of directors over the years on media training, preparing them to be interviewed, sometimes in very difficult circumstances. Today, we're a full-service digital marketing agency. We handle social media management, website development, search engine optimization, basically that online sales funnel that we all need as business people today. And that includes managing reputation as well. Some of our clients over the years, we've worked with big companies like Ford of Canada, and also small companies like local funeral directors and law firms. So I stumbled on this tweet last Thursday. It's from Scott Monty. Scott is the former head of PR for Ford in the United States. He's now a consultant in crisis communications and public relations out of Michigan. And I really liked this because if you're going to boil down some of the main principles of crisis communications to just one thing, or one easy phrase, this would probably be it. Good crisis leadership. Notice he says leadership, not communications, but it means the same in this context, is honest, transparent, timely, and flexible. So if we can do nothing more than just follow that advice, I think we're going to be much further ahead than we would otherwise. Crises are unpredictable. I know that seems obvious, but it's important to just dwell on that for a minute. We don't know what's coming up next. And in this particular crisis, more than any others, I think we've got a level of uncertainty that is just absolutely alarming. And when there is uncertainty, well, let's just say humans don't thrive when there's a lot of uncertainty. And when that uncertainty extends to our basic hierarchy of needs, like our livelihoods, can we get the groceries we need? Are we going to be healthy or sick in the next few days or weeks? Then that uncertainty really drives unparalleled levels of stress and worry. Now, the unfortunate thing about uncertainty and stress and worry is that the greater these things mount, the more we tend to speculate. And that leads to rumors and misinformation and panic. So our goal is, when we're communicating with any stakeholder group, is to inform and try to minimize that uncertainty, eliminate it as to the best of our ability, to calm and reassure people that we're talking to, and to encourage useful action to the extent that we can. You know, I've been telling my team that we've been, as PR marketing experts, we've been continued to be engaged with our clients, and I've told them that we're fortunate that we've got projects to be working on because it keeps our minds off of other things, and it's very true. So how do you do that? Well, you're probably seeing all of this in real time, just like anybody else. We need to, first and foremost, as leaders in our corners of our worlds, communicate urgently and frequently. Do not wait. If we wait, we have a tendency sometimes as business owners and business managers to wait until we have all the information in front of us. And that is exactly the wrong thing to do in these circumstances. We need to push forward with as much information, accurate information as we have currently, but we can't afford to wait. We need to communicate urgently and frequently. I have a friend who's joking with me the other day that she's now getting used to having her coffee at 10 a.m. with the Prime Minister. And there's a reason why these updates from our government are daily. It's because of they recognize the need to communicate urgently and frequently. Be honest, don't speculate, and it's better to say, I don't know, than to guess. It's better to say that information isn't available yet than to offer a guess or a speculation. And be compassionate. Understand that your audience, your customers, your employees don't have the information that you do. So their level of uncertainty is that much higher, at least in the questions that you're trying to deal with. And we're trying to tamp down that level of uncertainty. Erin, could you pop up the second survey question here? So this is, I know that there's a mixed audience today of stores and suppliers. So we're going to ask you if you have any social distancing measures in place. So that would include if you're working from home, for example. So talking to customers. Well, let's say start first of all with baseline principle. Your customers do want to hear from you. If you're like me, your email inbox is probably absolutely flooded with COVID-19 messages. I have received hundreds in the last few weeks, as I'm sure all of you have as well. And I haven't read all of them, but I have read some of them. And I mention this because some of your customers do want to hear from you. They do want to read that email, and they do want to know what's going on in your world. So it's important for you to communicate with your customers, even if you think it's overkill, even if you think there's really nothing to say, you do have something to say. We'll probably receive many thousand more COVID-19 emails, and that's okay. Give your customers the option to read them or not. I would say posting signage is absolutely vital. Remind people of, this is for stores mostly, but remind people of the rules of social distancing, for example. I like what my local Safeway has done. They have a sign at the checkout clerks discouraging the use of cash, encouraging the use of MasterCard, Visa, and Interact Debit so that you minimize the opportunities to pass germs from one another. You can talk about through signage any change in hours on the front of your building. You can talk about product availability. You can talk about just about anything through some well-placed signs, including some positive messages that, hey, we're here for you to the best of our ability, and please, talk to us if you have any questions about service during this time. And I would also, this is probably more for one-on-one communication, but remind people that if you do have questions, or if they do have questions of you, that the situation is fluid and changing. And just like we're hearing every day with our government messages, what we hear today may change, in fact, tomorrow. As businesses, I would encourage you to use multiple channels. This might be a good opportunity if you are not really engaged on social media to start experimenting. I would put all relevant information about any change in your business on your website, also on social media. So social media, we can go into a lot of different ways if you like in the questions about how you can use social media. I know, for example, that people are using this time at home to do a lot of home projects. So I know that there's a lot of people in this audience who might be able to connect and use this as an opportunity to bring additional value to your customers. I would strongly, strongly urge you to update your Google My Business page. If you do not know if you have that, rest assured every business has them. They are free. We're going to go into more detail next week. This was the subject of today's original webinar was about Google My Business and Google reviews. So we're going to get into that now next week. If you don't know if you have it, or if you don't know if you have claimed your business page, go to business.google.com. Google has made it pretty easy to update it. Now, why is this important? Because you can update your hours and all your store information just the same way as you're posting a signage on the front window of your store or on your voicemail message. You can update your hours and any other relevant information in your Google My Business page. Vitally important. People are searching on Google, and when they search your business, your hours will come up, your place, your location, maybe a map to your business. And within that, you have the control of changing your store hours and posting other messages. Use email, use chat if you use chat, update your voicemail messages, as I mentioned, and in person. If your operation is still open to the public, make sure your staff are briefed on what they should be saying to customers with regard to any of your policies and protocols. And then finally, advertising. If you've got advertising in market, I would encourage you to, if you have the ability to edit it or change it, I would encourage you to do that. At the very least, I would take a good hard look at all of your advertising to make sure it is not communicating messages you don't want out there. So it's perfectly fine to maintain your business operations and try to continue to sell and advertise. But I think, for example, this is not a time for humor in advertising. I would just play it straight and make sure that you're not sending out the wrong message. Okay, talking to staff. Aaron, can you put up the final poll for us, please? So it probably goes without saying that your employees, like everybody, are likely very worried about their personal safety and their job security. Personal safety, if your stores are open and you're still accepting customers into your store, you I hope are dealing with issues like social distancing and sanitizing or deep cleaning any common areas that are used, door handles, checkout counters, that sort of thing. That is something you should be talking with your employees about regularly to make sure that everyone is just crystal clear on what they are expected to do and know. And then for job security, I would also be recommending that you speak to all of your employees about what your decision framework is. Where are you right now? You don't have to show them all the details of your books and every little bit of information that you're basing your decisions on. But they're worried about it, and to alleviate those worries, it doesn't take much for us to explain what the decision-making framework is for layoffs, for example. I'm betting that if there are layoffs, most business owners are like myself, in that they want it to be temporary and they want every single person to come back. And if that's the message that you want to get out there, then that's the message you should be delivering. So I know that in my own business, I've said, we don't know. We don't know if layoffs will be required or work reductions will be required. We know that the government has, this is exactly the message that I gave. We know that the government has expanded access to EI and expanded access to programs like the WorkShare program through EI. And our next step, should we need a work reduction due to a loss of business, would be to tap that work-share program. And I'm trying myself to be as clear and transparent as possible so that my employees know, okay, so what if things really fall off the rails? What's next for me? And I would encourage you to do the same within your own decision-making framework. And I know it'll be different for everybody. But explain the options that you're looking at and the authorities that you're following to make those decisions and the information that you're looking at to make those decisions. I would encourage you to reassure people that you're going to need all your staff to rebound after this. We don't want to lose people, and we want to be as helpful as possible if layoffs are required to assist with tapping things like employment insurance and other programs. So I'll just emphasize again, it's important in these kinds of situations to not overpromise, just be honest. And no one, let me assure you, no one expects you to know all the answers, but they want to understand what your goals are and how you're making your decisions, especially if those decisions have an impact on their lives. And they do, obviously, in this case. So if layoffs are needed, or really even if they're not, I think it would be a good practice for businesses to be communicating regularly with their employees. I think the easiest way for a lot of businesses is just regular updates via email from the owners or managers. I know that some companies are setting up messaging groups with apps like WhatsApp or Facebook, and they're keeping people up to date on that. And I'd say that just the same as before with the other kinds of communications, sending something with a little new information is better than nothing at all. And this is going to stretch on for some time. So you might want to update people with positive stories of what your company or your customers or your community is doing to get through it. I think those are good messages to send. And I think you want to establish this as a go-to place for people who are looking for information about the company, what it's going through, when it's coming back, and so on and so forth. And I would continue to communicate as much as you can about additional government aid that employees can access, and offer assistance if possible. If people have already gone through the hoops of applying for one particular program, then share that information with the whole group and be as helpful as you can. We're all in this together. Our goal here is to be credible as possible. And that's what, leadership is going to, you're going to show leadership if you're credible, or rather good leaders show great credibility. And in my opinion, you're going to generate the most amount of credibility with timely, urgent communications, by being trustworthy and honest, and by being sympathetic. So, I just want to draw just briefly on something that General Romeo Dallaire said on Twitter the other day. He, if you remember, was the general in charge of the Canadian forces in Rwanda in the mid-1990s during that awful genocide. And he offered 3 points to keep in mind during a crisis. One, he said, keep all communications open. This is not a time to clam up. This is a time to talk, even if you don't have all the information. 2, don't take any risks that aren't essential for your survival. And I think that's for individuals as well as for the business. And I think that's a fair stand to take. And then 3, think about others who are at the heart of this crisis, both as victims and as respondents. Everyone is struggling with this. There isn't a single person who isn't. So make sure that in your communications, you're aware of that and try to be as empathetic as possible. Okay, so we're going to turn this over to you now for questions. I'm going to just share my screen back, or rather stop sharing my screen and take that over. But while we're just transferring screens here.
Sure. I'm back here. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. So I've got Leah right now on the line.
Before we get to questions, Jess, I just wanted to You know, there's a couple of businesses that I think are worthwhile looking at for as great case studies on.
Oh, okay, great. Yes, please tell us about those.
Yeah, who's doing it really well. Right now, I would say one that is a standout in Canada right now is Loblaws, and an honorable mention to Safeway and Sobeys. I think Loblaws with Galen Weston has done an outstanding job over the last couple of weeks. They are communicating through multiple channels. They're using paid advertising. You'll see Galen Weston on TV ads. You'll see emails. You'll see messages via your PC Points app. You'll see them all over social media. And I think they're doing an excellent job. They've raised, I think they're paying their employees an extra $2 an hour. They're communicating about any stores that need to be closed or deep cleaned. They're communicating about all of that stuff. And so if you want a good example, I would look at Loblaws. And then I think Qantas Airlines is another one that stood out for me last week. The airline industry has been absolutely slammed. And Qantas management came out and said in the middle of this, as they were announcing the basic shutdown of their entire operation, that they are all in this together. That was the loud message. Management is not taking any salaries. There's no bonuses. So it's basically we're in this together and we're going to get through it together kind of message. So I'd point to those two as good examples. Over to you, Jess.
Thanks. Well, those are two great examples. I think you had mentioned one, and I am a PC Points member, and I know those are actually one of the few emails that I do read when I get them, because I do find his emails are very succinct in terms of the information that is the most important to me and what the messaging is. So that's a great example. Just a reminder, everybody, to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to post any questions. So Adam, I do have a question for you, just going back to some of our members have stores that are dealing with the public, and some of our members have perhaps businesses that don't necessarily have a lot of public traffic coming in. And we're all trying to adhere to social distancing, which is, of course, very much open to sometimes interpretation by the individual. But in some cases, customers and clients don't want to follow these rules. How do you suggest some of our businesses handle them when it comes to communicating what the business's social distancing policy is?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I understand that some retailers are dealing with some pretty upset customers who are coming in and trying to take out their frustration. Well, I think first of all, be empathetic, right? Try to keep your calm, but you've got to enforce the rules to the best of your ability. And I would say this is where signage really comes in as a big help in the store. But also you've got to make sure your employees are all briefed on what to say and how to say it. So take some time to role play with staff if you're finding that this is a major problem. And be familiar with what the local medical officers of health are issuing in terms of guidelines, so that you can just say, hey, these are the guidelines. This is what we're required to do. We really respectfully ask you to do this.
That's great. Actually, I never would have thought of role playing, but that's actually a really good tip to have people role play with each other to sort of make sure that everyone's consistent in their messaging. So another question we have, I'll throw this over to Leah, which goes back to social media. What are your impressions of what your business's social media should look like right now? What sort of information do you think that should be published? What sort of messaging should be put on?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so right now, social media is a blessing and a curse. I don't think we would be as inundated with all the messaging that we are right now about Corona if it wasn't for social media. But it can be also a very good way to get information out to your followers, your customers, your suppliers very quickly. I think you want to make your social media very beneficial. There's a lot of information out there right now. So give them the must-have pieces of information, whether it's your store hours, the measures you're taking to adhere to the social distancing regulations, any staffing changes, how to get in touch with you right now, because that may be difficult if people are working from home or what have you. And if you are going to share information, links or videos or whatnot, make sure it's from a credible source. The WHO, the government, CDC, try to avoid sharing pieces of information that may just be fear-mongering or may not be as reliable. And I think above and beyond, just make sure you're honest and compassionate and try to build up that trust and loyalty so that when this is all over, and it will be over, you can go back and still have that good relationship. And last, I would say just make sure to have any messages that you're posting be reviewed by a second, third, maybe fourth set of eyes before it's posted. Right now, in difficult times, even something that is seen as innocent or you have good intentions, it can be taken the wrong way right now, and now is not the time to be making knee-jerk reactions. Emotions are high. You don't want to be seen as profiteering right now. So when in doubt, going silent is going to be better than posting something that will be taken the wrong way.
That's great. And that's a really good point. That actually leads me to my next question that I have that has come in to Adam, which kind of ties to it. Some of our businesses already have advertising out there in the marketplace, and they're kind of wondering if they should change the focus of their advertising to be crisis related.
Yes and no. I think listen, everyone, as long as you're allowed by the local authorities to be open and running your business, then you have certainly a right to be advertising. I would just say it's review, like Leah just mentioned with social media, review everything you've got in market. There may be an opportunity, a genuine opportunity to change some of the advertising that you have out there. Loblaws changed theirs to a public service message. I noticed that Staples changed theirs to a set up your home office kind of sale. And that's all legitimate. I think Leah's comment about you don't want to be seen as profiteering is bang on, but mainly you can't advertise products that people need.
Right. That's it's a really good point. And you're right. I think having extra set of eyes and opinions in there just to make sure that you're not crossing a line is really important. So Leah, one of the questions we did have come in was more about internal communications within a business. How do employers keep their employees in the loop when they are working from home or they've had their store hours restricted? Right now we hear a lot of things about social distancing doesn't mean social isolation. How do you recommend an employer to keep in touch with those employees that aren't necessarily in the offices anymore?
Yes, working from home is thankfully not new in 2020. We've been doing it for quite a while, some businesses more than others, but thanks to technology, it is something that we can do. I mean, if this was happening, 10, 15 years ago, we would be laying off a lot more people than we are now, thankfully. So I think important things to note is to communicate often and with all necessary parties. It is better to over-communicate with your staff right now than to under-communicate. Schedule regular check-ins. Depending on what you're doing, I mean, that may be daily, that may be every couple of days, but make sure that you're checking in on a somewhat regular basis, and don't rely on emails or texts at this point. I mean, obviously use them, but pick up the phone, set up video conferences. I mean, that will help with the feeling like you don't want to social isolate people. It will adhere to that, but also it gives that face-to-face aspect that you would normally get in an office that people may not be getting right now. And there are so many ways that people can read into emails and text messages. It's a very difficult part of business on a day-to-day basis anyways, and it's going to be even worse right now. So pick up the phone, have those conversations. People will be able to tell by your tone certain things that they will not get over email. And above and beyond, make sure you're accessible. During those normal work hours, you want to be picking up the messages, checking in regularly, and responding as quickly as possible.
Oh, great, thanks. And I guess too, nowadays we have a lot of great technology that allows us to chat to each other face to face virtually. So that's been great. So I just wanted to follow up with that question with Adam. So how can an employer perhaps ease resentment or concerns amongst staff while they're still operating?
How can an employer
Like how can someone who's running a business, if there's resentment or concerns amongst staff because they are still open, what tips would you suggest the employer use to ease those concerns and resentment?
Well, I would say do your best to over communicate why you're doing this. Like Leah said, I don't think you can over communicate in a time like this. There's people are resenting being at work. I would make sure that you're explaining as best as you can how you're trying to follow all the public health guidelines, but that there's a need for the show to go on. It's if you are in a situation where somebody is really just not wanting to go to work, then that's a different thing entirely. That's an HR issue that I think you're going to have to deal with separately. But as a group, I would just try to explain very clearly that you're trying to maintain the business as best as possible for everyone's sake, and these are the ways that you're following the public health guidelines to make sure that business can continue in some fashion while keeping people as safe as possible.
That's a great point. One of our members just chimed in that they said they, as a recommendation, to encourage to be ready to be back to work, make sure your staff is geared for the business as usual, and be ready to keep going and keeping in contact them so that when it is over, everyone's ready to hit the ground running, which I think is a really great point as part of overall communications and doing that.
Yeah, and you know, it's probably, I mean, it's hard to tell what things are going to look like in a few weeks, but I would expect that as we roll through this and more people get it, and I'm not a doctor, but I assume that once you've got it, you're immune. And that so as we kind of roll through this, there'll be a slow lifting of all these restrictions and more people will be able to move around. And as we do that, it's going to be really important that you're communicating to everybody about what's going on and why you're making these decisions. You know, there's just no way to over communicate right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to put this question to both of you. If you had one top tip for employees who maybe are wanting to talk to their employer about their concerns and maybe are nervous or afraid, what tip would you suggest in terms of having a conversation or a dialogue if they have concerns about being at work and feel maybe as not maybe a senior member of staff, but maybe one of the team, that, you know, how do they address that with their employer or their senior manager? I'll ask you first, Adam, if you have a tip that you would suggest an employee in approaching a senior manager, and then I'll ask you, Leah.
Well, first of all, I would hope that an employee wouldn't feel the need to have to approach. I would hope that employers are offered the opportunity to have this discussion with their people. Mm-hmm. That here are the work rule changes now. That this is the life that we're living right now, and here's why we're doing this. Do you have any questions? Can we deal with all the questions right now? And then offer people the opportunity to come to you one-on-one if needed. And I would really hope that nobody is feeling that they don't have an opportunity to discuss or ask questions. I think you've got to be open to those things.
That's great. Leah, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would also say make sure you're solution focused. I mean, whoever this is, a senior manager or president, CEO, board of directors, they're looking at this from so many different angles. So what it comes down to is, you know, this is a problem. What is your solution? How are you going to fix it? If you want to work from home, how can you make that happen? If you need to lay off some people, what are the next steps? Just make sure that you look at it from that standpoint of this is the problem, this is how we can fix it.
That's great. Thank you. Did either of you want to add anything else before we wrap up? Adam, any last minute tips?
Not
to put you on the spot there.
I mean, there's lots of things that you can and should be doing. Mostly, I would just, you know, be timely, be honest, be straightforward. Remember, everyone's going through a rough time, and try to be the leadership that you'd want to see if you were in the opposite role. That's
a great point. Leah, did you want to add anything at all before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I would just remind people that when you're talking to employees, they ultimately have two main focuses, my health and my paycheck. And if you can address those on a short-term and long-term basis, you will be much better off, and you will have a very happy staff at the end of this.
That's very true. Thanks, Leah. So just before we wrap things up, I want to thank Adam and Leah for their time. It was very greatly appreciated. And I also wanted to let our members know that Duly PR and Marketing is available for anybody, any of our members. Duly PR and Communication is one of our members and is available if anybody requires any additional help. They are offering some discounts right now for hourly communication advice. I hope I got that right, Adam, sorry. And we'll send out that information when we send out the link. We also just wanted to remind everybody that Adam is back with us next week again. Maybe things will be really different and positive, but we rescheduled today's webinar to next week, which was the Google Your Business. So we've rescheduled it, and it will be next week on March 31st, 12:30 to 1:30 Central Standard Time, and we'll be really excited to welcome Adam back. So I just want to thank everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe, is taking care, and is being kind to each other right now, because I think that is really what's most important right now. Thank you so much, and take care, everybody.